Well, good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Should be a lively discussion. There is a lot of fallout from this election, but I'm not depressed. I think we're a divided country, and that didn't change. Some red places got redder, some blue places shifted slightly as far as vote percentages to the right, but it wasn't enough, and I wish it would have been. Today, my guest is Sean Burdine,
Hello.
a man of many talents.
You say so.
We're going with many talents.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me today.
No, glad you're here. Always makes an easier show, and I appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much.
I think it was a mistake that it was couched as a red tsunami.
That's my view entirely. I think that really the most important thing for politics comes down to it's perception. It's a perception battle. When you try to play it up as something that's going to be really massive, you set yourself up for a very difficult task ahead of you. And if you do not succeed in this massive successes, it you can only frame it as a failure, and it makes it very easy for your opponents to frame it as a failure. And I think it's always important to be able to frame it and any success that you can as a success. So when we look at these sorts of things, I think, if we're looking at it this way in a negative light, I think it's largely just because kind of oversold expectations on this going into it.
I think that's fair. With nobody at the top of the ticket, no national candidate, a lot of people stay home. I don't understand why, because I actually think local is significantly more important. But it's like we haven't given up the idea. We got rid of a king quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And there seems to still be a desire to have one leader that'll fix all our problems. And the truth is, we need good government at the local level to protect our constitutional rights. And we need a leader at the top that is smart and articulate and mostly gets out of the way. I don't see it as we need a leader that tells us what to do and is a petty dictator, much like Biden wanted to do with the shots.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, that's basically what our country was founded on, was the idea that local, close to home jurisdictions were incredibly important because, the election closest to home is one that's going to be most reflected to people who live in that area.
Yep, federalism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hotly debated, contested at the start of our country, went back and forth, lots and lots of discussions surrounding that. But by and large, that is why we have the constitutional republic framework that we have today. Some people they don't go to vote unless there is that really big name draw that pulls them in. It's no secret that unfortunately midterm elections do tend to have fairly bit lower than any presidential, just because people take that one more seriously for some reason. But
that's part of it. I think there's another element that we're seeing. So much of the country is concerned about election integrity.
Yes, that I think is definitely a component there too.
If they don't believe their vote matters, they're not going to bother, and that's sad. But the one thing that people forget is, if you don't vote, you're guaranteed of an outcome.
Right. Well, I definitely think that there's an element of that without a doubt. Where again, feeding into that perception idea. There's a Ford quote that I really like. It's whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right.
Yep.
And we kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy on that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've spent a huge amount of time, investigating election integrity, follow it across the country, across the state, locally, all of that. And I definitely, and this is something I want to talk about just for a little bit here, because statewide, I'm incredibly concerned with the system that we have right now. Locally, the people that I've worked with, the people that I've met locally, I think are fantastic, very professional. They've been very accommodating. I enjoy them.
So you're specifically talking Register of Voters Office, Fresno County.
Yes, and the elections warehouse and the people themselves are fantastic. My concern is with the system that we have developed and the system that we use throughout the state, especially post-COVID, where everything's mass vote-by-mail election. It creates a lot of issues, and I think that's one of the things we're also seeing across the country. Right now, for locally, for Fresno County, we have still, it's the same number of votes counted since election night. And it's not, because of just, I'm sure some people want to jump to the conclusion there's some shady stuff happening. But what it is right now is a massive bottleneck on our system. We've got 126,000 votes that have been counted since election night. Those are all of the early vote by mail ballots that were cast before election day, and all of the ballots that had been cast by tabulator on election day. So if you had a paper ballot and you voted at a voting center on that day, or any day at a vote center, or even one of the touchscreens, those have been counted, those have been tabulated. But as of this morning, we have 75,000 votes that still have not been counted for our county. And if you heard me yesterday on Guillermo, I said it was 64,000. Today we had several more thousand that came in through the mail system. And again,
as long as they're postmarked, they're accepted, right?
If anybody put them into the mail yesterday, at any point yesterday into the mail system, they would be postmarked for yesterday, which was election day, which means they're still legally...
No, day before yesterday.
Well, day before yesterday, excuse me. If they put them in on election day and they came into, yesterday or today, as long as they are postmarked for election day. Thank you. It's been a long couple of days here,
absolutely.
man.
I know.
Not a lot of sleep, a lot of coffee. But no, so long as they're postmarked for election day, they're still legal ballots, but it's just how the system works.
You can address this with Fresno County.
Mm-hmm.
About what percentage of the ballots haven't been counted?
Over a third. Well over a third at this point.
So that means that any race that's close,
yes,
we really don't know.
Right.
How does that compare to statewide? Do you have any idea?
Each state's or each county in the state is going to differ a little bit, but so long as they're using a vote by mail system that like we are, it just has a massive bottleneck on the system. I mean, comparing it to elections in the past where we used the precinct system, for instance, we've got 562 precincts in our county alone. Not every single precinct is going to have one. Sometimes you double up a little bit, but we're going to end up with, hundreds of different precincts with a handful of volunteers on that day that are all going to count all at once. Many hands make light work.
Yes, but I want to point out that a state like Alaska, logistically, Alaska blows anything that California could be talking about away.
Yeah.
Because of the huge distances you have with people. And yet, they essentially know what happened. They're truly at 99%, and they're just waiting on a few things.
Right, and that's the difference in the election systems. Because instead of us, spreading that work out all across a bunch of people all at once, everything is funneled through our processing center, where everything has to go one step at a time. Most of these steps only have a few people at a station just for the logistics purposes. So realistically, we're still about a week out before all the ballots are finished being counted, and we still have even a couple weeks after that for everything to be finalized.
That's bizarre to me, because if you look at third world countries, they can get it done in a day. We have chosen to not be able to get it done in a day. We've chosen to have a month to vote and a month to count them.
It's an election season now. It's not just an election day or night.
The problem with that is that creates all kinds of opportunities for malfeasance.
Potentially. That's, again, one of the things, when I worked with Election Integrity Project, the words that I used were weaknesses and vulnerabilities, because I don't want to necessarily say, or make any accusations that anybody is cheating, but if somebody wanted to with a system like this, there's a lot of vulnerabilities.
There's a lot of spaces. I don't know it nearly as well as you, and I can think of several spots where that could happen. So I see it as, okay, let's believe that both sides cheat. I believe in this state the Democrats are better at it, but I believe both sides cheat. But you can still, in a conservative area, sometimes a liberal gets elected. In a liberal area, sometimes a conservative gets elected.
Right.
That means that the process generally works, even though it has some real vulnerabilities. So, you just got to beat the spread.
Right, and it's one of the things, as we look across the country. I mean, I'm tapped into some updates across, all these different states, different counties. Everything varies so much on these processes. So I think it becomes a contributing factor in some races and a bigger contributing factor in some races more than others. But this is one of those things where I know a lot of people, I've spoken to them, since the 2020 election. Their mindset is that our votes don't matter, the whole system is rigged. And I think for a lot of people, the most important thing to do is to still vote, even if you don't think that it is. And I think that, it goes back again to this perception thing about the red tsunami. I think it created even a bit of complacency with some voters who thought, you know what, it's going to be so big, maybe I don't need to. Maybe it's raining out there, maybe I don't feel like driving out there. And so it's just one more thing that kind of allows us to not vote.
I don't know. I see it in this state. It's so easy to be registered and so easy to vote.
Yeah.
They've bent over backwards. They don't care whether you're actually somebody that's eligible to vote in this state. Barely. I know.
They make it as easy as possible for any person to vote.
Yes. So if that's the case,
yeah,
there's plenty of voter guides. Is there somebody you trust?
Right.
But for instance, I put out my own personal voter guide and put it on social media. I don't know if it's any better than some of the others, but if you trust my opinion, okay, you didn't have to figure it all out yourself. And frankly, sometimes there's races that are almost impossible to find any information about.
Right.
School boards are often that way. Judgeships are very much that way. Maybe you have to leave some of them blank, but it's not hard to vote. In 20 minutes, you very easily could find a couple sources that you believe in and just follow their guide.
Right. I mean, it is one of those things where I think moving forward from this is I expect, the next election, 2024, to be even more contested. I expect big names on those tickets, and, I expect things to be just as polarized as they are today, maybe even possibly more. So I'm expecting big turnout on that. It's just, I'm really hoping that we can just make sure we get the vote out. That's the most important thing. Just make sure we get people to vote.
Well, I don't believe that the economy is going to be all better in 24. I think that at best we're going to limp along. And that saddens me because I don't think that there's leadership at a state level that or at a national level that is going to help the economy.
Well, I mean, I think there's always a silver lining to anything getting worse. That means, more people will realize the problems. I mean, like I've brought up before, I think that, we're having conversations about some topics today that I mean, a few years ago, I didn't expect to just be talking about as openly or be part of the national conversation anyway. But people are awake and aware and talking about a lot of these things, and more people are leaving the Democrat Party for particular reasons, finding concerns, finding criticisms. Go woke, go broke has been universally true almost. The economy is in rough shape, and people are still concerned with that. So I think there's a lot of reasons why, if we continue down this current trend, things will continue to reverse. And I think sometimes people kind of get lost in sort of a potential trap of thinking that a trend will just continue on in perpetuity. That's not
that's not the case.
No, usually we reach a tipping point.
Another thing that I consider to be particularly hopeful, and I hate to look at people by the color of their skin. Really, I wish we were not in that society. But the truth is that African Americans have essentially in the 90% level up till recently always voted Democrats. And you could say that Hispanics are in the 75% up till recently. And those are beginning to change. I don't believe that the color of your skin should define your ideas or which party you vote for. You should look at your values, and then you should look at the platforms of well, I would even encourage maybe a third party. I look at those values and decide where you belong, as opposed to just going along with the crowd.
Well, I think people are. I think I've never been a huge fan of breaking stuff up by the racial demographics, but that's how the system is working. And when we do break it down that way, we do notice there is large shift in those trends, especially the Asian Hispanic community. I started my favorite political ads this time around were actually just targeted at the Asian community, saying basically we work hard. We try to pass on traditional values to our children, and instead of being rewarded for it, we're punished for it. And told people don't vote for Democrats. It's like, wow, I've never seen an ad quite that bold.
Asians very seldom, and I don't know why, and I'm sure I actually have friends that are the exceptions, but they tend to be very quiet, very respectful.
Yeah.
very hardworking, very family-oriented people.
But I think the important takeaway here, though, is that really that people are getting tired of a lot of the messaging coming from Democrats, lefties, whatever name you like calling it. There's a lot of people that are very sanctimonious. You know, they're trying to tell people what's best for them and tell them that they know better and all of that. And I think just by and large, people are tired of it. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. People want to be left alone. People want to just be able to go to work. People just want to be able to enjoy their life. They want to have their hobbies, their friends, their families. And they don't want to feel like they're being punished for, and just trying to live their life.
In other words, they want to embrace the American dream.
Yeah. I mean, that's why people come here. And I think that's one of the things, too. I've got an anecdote on that where I had a friend at work. He's part of the Hmong community. His family had, immigrated here when all the Hmong families came here. Father was very prominent and, basically told everyone, it's like, okay, we now live in America. We can hold on to a lot of our traditions, a lot of our culture and values, but we're Americans now. And when they first came here, they voted heavily Democrat. But by being here and kind of just paying attention and realizing, well, the Democrats are just trying to get our votes by promising us free stuff and don't always really deliver on that. But the Republicans, they actually want to help build us up. They actually want to help encourage us to be successful and get into entrepreneurship and all of these things. Ended up going from largely Democrat to Republican. And, obviously, I can't say that about everybody. I'm not trying to make sweeping generalizations, but I do think that there is a trend that we are seeing more and more where a lot of, immigrant families are making those sorts of shifts. You start looking, a lot of the Hispanic community, very, traditionally fairly blue. A lot of them in the last, election cycle are turning to look at the Republican Party.
Yeah, we don't know numbers yet, but we know that it has definitely shifted that way, even in this last election. We just don't know the exact numbers.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important to sort of frame all these things because, if we get locked in this mindset that, what we witnessed on this election cycle was just a massive defeat, I don't think it's doing it justice because I do think that we're still very much locked in the middle of a culture war at the moment. And, to quote Andrew Breitbart, politics are downstream from culture. And so what that means is that, if we really want to see the reflection of the politics and government that we want to see, the most important thing is influencing the culture.
Yes, but I want to point out that all change starts with yourself.
Well, there's
look in the mirror if you want to make a change,
well,
and then you can influence your family, your community, and it moves outward. There's where culture starts.
Well, I certainly agree with that, but I think it's also important to keep in mind that the context of what we've kind of been going through the last few years, where, certain types of ideas, perceptions, political leanings would get you banned and blocked all across social media. All this woke media, woke capitalism was attacking certain things. You get blocked and banned for criticizing anything, and I think we're moving away from that. And so that's another trend that I kind of see large scale that moving into the future was going to continue as more free speech is opened up again because people realized how valuable it is and missed the ability to actually speak their mind. And by doing that, we're going to see more of these conversations continue to grow as more people feel more comfortable talking about them.
Well, I think the explosion of podcasts speaks to that.
Absolutely.
The idea that more and more people are embracing hearing absolute free speech, not some censored. They want real. They want candidates that are real, but they want their news to be real. And that's why you've seen cable news and established media dying.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Last several years, that's a major trend also. The major news networks, the major radio stations, the major newspapers, magazines, everything, all of our traditional pillars, if they are not reflecting what people are thinking and feeling, people have other options now. That's one of the hugest explosions in internet is that people have anywhere they can go. If they want to go, they can.
Why do you think so many politicians want to censor the internet?
Oh, absolutely.
It's because they don't want an arena of ideas where free speech reigns, and then the best ideas, I would hope, I realize it doesn't always work that way, but I would hope they would rise to the top.
Right.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to all you people that think this is worth your time. I appreciate the fact that you're willing, and I'm honored that you're willing to take the time to listen to what I have to say. I try to at least be insightful. I try to bring on guests that are real and have things to say. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and just jump briefly into a little bit of schools because we're not going to get all this in today. There's just no way. But
no, I think I do think it was important to kind of talk about the silver linings of that dark.
And we'll come back to some of the positives before we're done.
Okay.
We're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Sean Burdine, and we're talking about kind of the fallout of this November election. It really makes me pause because we didn't actually shift very much. We did shift. Red places got redder. Blue places got slightly redder in some cases.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a tsunami. All those people that were predicting that were wrong. I think a lot of that, though, has to do with the candidates. I want to go ahead and tie this into local because so many of my people are interested in local. I'm just going to focus on two school boards. First one is Clovis.
Okay.
We really don't know for sure who won it in Clovis Unified in Area 1. That's kind of the Clovis West district. It's part of Fresno in the northwest part of Clovis.
Right.
But it looks like Clint Olivier has won. Now, he had name recognition, but he skipped 2 of the 3 debates. He had opportunities when he was interviewed to actually talk about the district, and I didn't feel he did until the 3rd debate. The 3rd debate, I thought he actually did fairly well, and I was pleased to see that he actually knew some details about the district. There was no indication when he announced on Ray Appleton that he knew anything about the district. It was Clovis good, I'm running, Clovis good. I'm glad that he's developed from there. He is the likely winner, but as we talked about a 1/3 of the votes are still outstanding.
Right, and so that's the thing with some of these closer races. I mean, it is definitely too close to call. I think it's potentially still in play. It's likely that he will win, but it's not guaranteed. I think the real story for Clint is really, I mean, he played a very safe campaign, and it paid off for him. It looks.
That's too bad. I want candidates to actually get out, have a stand, have an opinion, be strong and bold, and that's why I didn't back him.
Right. Well, we've talked about it before. Those are the things I really like. I think it paid off for the Clovis City Council, but when it comes to the school board, Clint Olivier, I've mentioned it before. At a candidate training forum, he laid out his strategy and game plan. It's all about name recognition. You get good signs that only say your name, the position you're running for, and just make sure they're in the right spots, and just don't implode. The safest thing you can do is speak less, so that way you don't accidentally say something that really just put your candidate.
Gee, I'd be proud to vote for somebody that doesn't want to take a stand.
Well, we'll see where he stands if he does when he takes the school board. If he takes the school board, it's going to be pretty interesting. But he definitely played a very safe campaign. Lots of signs, just his name in all the right places, and get the right endorsements.
We have another area. We're going to jump over to Fresno because I'm not going to have time to go through all of these. I'm going to do 2 Fresnos. One is Area 4, which is the McLean district. That would be the 3 main people that were running are Viva Islas, Karen Steed, and Michelle Scary. At this point, we are 25 votes. Now, we don't have updated voter rolls. 25 votes between the 2 top people, which would be Viva Islas, the woke leftist, and Karen Steed, who was in the district for quite a number of years at the toughest of the schools, essentially the continuation school. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, this one's a tie. When they're this close and there's still so many ballots to be counted, this is a tie. It's not just close; it's effectively a tie right now. And this one's kind of interesting to me because if you look at kind of the trends for the national and statewide, it's very heavily favored for incumbents. But this is one of the races where the incumbent's not guaranteed to win, and it's
Well, I think this one parallels the next race. The incumbent is an extreme woke leftist. There's nothing moderate about this woman. She was basically thrilled with the thought that somebody that did not take the shot would die. And she publicly said so.
Yeah.
Not wise, not kind.
Yeah, and that's why we can't just fully forgive. I mean, that's one of those things where it's like, I mean, in order to really kind of come together eventually down the line, we'll have to move past this stuff. But I mean, it's so horrific to me that we were in that period of time where we really did have people just, cheering on people getting sick or dying. Like, I mean, even for the people that I disagree with, I would never do that. I'd still wish them well. It's just
Yeah, I want them to disappear on an island and never have to deal with them again, but I don't want them to die.
some of them, but no, I just it's just that sort of divisive rhetoric, especially in politics. You're just perpetuating it.
Mm-hmm.
It creates further division, causes more problems, and I think by and large people are tired of it.
That brings me to the next race, where the incumbent actually, I don't see how the incumbent comes back. But again, we're only talking about 3,500 votes. And that is Area 7, the Bullard District. That is Susan Withrop, Terry Sladek, a guy named James Barr got almost 1,500 votes. A guy named Michael Haynes got almost 500 votes. These are not updated numbers. This isn't out of the water yet, but it looks like Susan Winthrop, who really didn't take any strong stands, but she did walk. And because she's connected to GV Wire and connected to Granville Homes, meaning her boyfriend is in charge of those, she had more funding than all of the Fresno and all of the Clovis school board races by a factor of, I think, 3.
Yeah, with this one, I think it comes down again to another very safe campaign, more or less.
Safe campaign, and on the other side, even though I supported Terry Sladek because he's the only one bringing light to the district, he was perceived as being divisive.
Right. And I think that's a big part of the story here. I mean, you look at Susan's campaign, day one where they can have signs up. She's got big signs with all the right endorsements, her names, what position she's running for, in all the right places. And she didn't really say a lot of controversial things. She had a huge money backing her. Whereas Terry Sladek, while he's had his position on the board, been very vocal about a lot of the issues. And so it's one of the things I think sometimes it can be polarizing, especially sometimes the delivery. But to his credit, I mean, he was really championing change and really trying to help the students and make sure that we get that school district back on track.
And I don't believe that Susan Winthrop will do that at all, but she might surprise me.
She might, but it really is two very different campaigns on that. One played it safe with lots of money behind them, lots of endorsements,
Abundant money,
over 160,000, I believe.
Right, which is what it would typically take to win a city council seat for Fresno. In other words, normal might be as much as 10,000. So she's somewhere around 16 times normal for Fresno School Board.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a whole lot. We'll see if her political career stays on the school board or if there's further aspirations.
I just shudder at the thought, but maybe she'll surprise me.
Hey,
She did seem like a nice woman. I just don't believe she will take strong stands, but she did seem like a nice person.
With that number of endorsements and that much money backing her for the campaign, I would not be surprised to see if she runs for city council.
Well, they're pretty bad, so, even somebody that isn't strong would probably be better. She might be another Mike Barbassi.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's another conversation, but I would expect her to keep going down that route, honestly.
I'm going to just jump in because I know this guy personally. I think he's a great guy.
Okay.
Kings Joint Union School District. A friend of mine named Matt Casares. Young guy, smart guy.
Yeah.
He's in second place currently. He's about 35 votes behind. There's less than 1,000 votes currently in this district. He could still pull it out.
Yeah.
This guy's 20 years old.
Yeah.
He's smart. He's articulate. Matt, I got to give you a huge shout out. And even if you only come in second, Thank you for running. Thank you for stepping up. This is a good guy.
Yeah, no, Matt's incredible. I mean, he's the kind of guy that he puts himself into everything that he
Mhm.
does, and he puts himself into a lot. He's very active, very engaged, very passionate, very, very intelligent person.
Mhm.
If he gets elected, I think that'll be a very lucky school district.
Yes, he is wise beyond his years.
Oh, beyond, way
Yeah.
beyond.
I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the Clovis City Council. My picks exactly happened. I was hopeful that Diane Pierce would come in first, and she might still. But she came in second, and Drew is absolutely a great incumbent. He presided over the Clovis City Council during COVID, and he was a point of light. He said, "We are going to protect your way of life. We're going to protect the Clovis way of life." This is why local matters. This is why I'm highlighting this race,
Right.
because we had people on the Clovis City Council that went, "Newsom, our people need to make a living. We want to keep fire and emergency services funded, which means our people need to be bringing in money." And they also believed in freedom. They said, "Hey, if we don't consider it to be what we call egregious," and they left a lot of ground with egregious, "you go back to work. If we find you're doing something crazy, like, every person that comes in, you're supposed to lick their hand, something crazy like that, and I don't think that's probably going to happen, go back to work." The city we're sitting in right now decided that as soon as they had power, I think they were just rubbing their hands going, "Oh, what can we make these sheep do?" And largely that's what happened in Fresno. They didn't fight for their rights. So local government matters. So Drew came in first. Any comments on Drew?
Well, just also just point of clarity.
Well,
We're
might
not,
have come in first.
we're still we don't know the final totals yet. But honestly, I like all three that got it. I think every time I've heard Drew speak, and times I've yeah, I mean, I have nothing but positive things to say about Drew. I want to see more people like Drew at local government. I want to
Mhm.
see more people that are willing to stand up for the constituents and not necessarily be dictated from the top down.
Mhm.
Just say, no, you know what, that's a nice recommendation, but we think this is going to work better for us. And because local control is one of the most important issues to me these days, because I feel we've been losing it. It's been
Mhm.
eroding over time as we allow our capital at the state and national levels to dictate what we can and can't do
Well,
rather than allowing us our own freedoms.
one party rule
It,
corrupts.
it,
And
yeah, absolutely it does.
and I would say that of the Republicans also.
Yeah.
If there was not a strong opposition to keep people honest, we
Well,
have to worry.
I think that's another thing to bring up with the way our system's designed. It's designed for change to happen as slowly as possible and
Mhm.
force as much discussion before a change is really adopted. And really, that's why it's so important for the culture to really affect it, because we still have the ability to vote and push for the things that we want. And so when things are kind of tenuous like this, and we're kind of going back and forth in a lot of these states, and a lot more dialogue is forced. When you've got a state like California, where it really is just one party rule at the Capitol, there
Any
is,
crazy idea makes it all the way through,
oh yeah,
and the governor goes, "Oh boy,
yeah,
let's see. We should allow minors to," and this one's from a little while ago, "we should allow minors that are 14 years younger than their sex partners, as long as it's consensual. That's not rape in California."
yeah, especially the last couple of years during emergency powers, all the lockdown. There was so much just crazy and radical legislation. It's
Mhm.
a lot of it's
Well,
kind of
we're not through
we're not through
the state of
emergency.
emergency.
No,
King Newsom made sure that he got just another jolt to that power.
right, and that's why I'm hoping down the road we'll get more pushback against it. But for right now, I think things are going to get a little bit weirder in California, and
Mhm.
just the big hope for me is our court system to kind of keep the checks and balances in play.
This was interesting to me when I looked. Now, these are again not updated numbers, but I assume that probably these trends will stay fairly close. When I looked at every statewide race, approximately 57% voted Democrat and approximately 43% voted Republican. Every race, it was pretty close to that. and there was a few exceptions. Tony Thurmond against Lance Christensen, public instruction. Superintendent of public instruction was a little more of a blowout with the Democrat winning more. But in general, there's where it was. When I looked at Fresno County, Madera County, and Tulare County, again, not updated numbers, they were trending exactly or almost exactly the opposite of that. This is one of the places where we could turn the state around.
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel that way, and I felt that way for a while. I genuinely mean this, where I think that if we are going to see California start to shift, it's going to come from the Valley, and I think Fresno has a lot of what's necessary to make that happen right now. And we just need a little bit more push, a little bit more support, and big things can happen.
A little better leadership, a little better organization.
Yeah, and I think right now, we're learning, we're figuring out what that kind of looks like. But once we kind of get the fire going, I think we should honestly really be making some big stuff happen here. Right now, based on the election map I was looking at, we're light red, and I wouldn't be surprised if it stays that way, honestly, with voting trends and how much we still have left. I think it's pretty interesting. I think that that's a pretty interesting development. In California right now, I mean, it really stays true to the idea that the coastal metropolises, it's Greek, not Roman, or Latin, but metropolises continue to stay deep blue, and the rest of the state continue to kind of turn a little bit redder. It's been interesting watching that trend kind of shift a bit here.
Well, it's definitely shifted. San Francisco got rid of their DA. They got rid of the school board.
Yeah.
One of the most left of the left places.
I was surprised by that. We'll see what comes of that one. But there's been some interesting trends and shifts happening in the state. I think we are reaching that point where I may not be there for everybody, but I really think we're reaching that point, that tipping point.
Well, Asians whose kids generally do really well are being discriminated against.
Yeah.
And by that I mean that at the college level, even if they did everything right and worked their butts off, they don't get in because they're so successful.
Yeah, the nickname for it, it's been around for several years. I didn't come up with it, but the unofficial term for it is the bamboo seal. It's because what ends up happening is, by and large, students of Asian descent, students of Asian ancestry, overperform compared to their peer group and becomes hyper competitive, and there's racial quotas for a lot of these school districts, school boards, or school districts and universities. And so what ends up happening is they can only take so many, and so instead of competing against everyone, they're competing only against the small pool of overperforming Asian students. So they must vastly overperform.
Another race that is near and dear to me is in Congress. That is the 21st district. That is Michael Marr and Jim Costa. That's a D plus 20 district. Yeah. And at this point, we're looking at about a 6 or so point spread between the two. That's making up a lot of ground. That it looks like that Costa's fine and Marr is going to lose.
Well,
but that's significant.
It's huge, and this is one of the other things too that I think is really so hard for any new candidate is building that name recognition, getting that support network, building up the money in order to actually put on a strong competition. And I mean, credit to Marr. I mean, this is an incredibly close race in a race that nobody expected to be close.
Right. It was expected to be a 15 or 20 point blowout, and instead 6 points is pretty close. So thank you, Michael, for running. I hope that you consider running again, because from the point I first met Michael to where he is today, he has grown tremendously, and we need good people like him that are smart and articulate and are willing to step up.
Well, my stance for the last few months and stuff, ever since the primary, I've seen so many candidates last year, 2 years, just really grow and find their voice, find their footing, build up a network and foundation for their campaign. And if it's the first time you've ever run for anything, that's a whole lot of groundwork to do.
There's a learning curve.
There's a huge learning curve. So a lot of these candidates across California that ran, whether it be they found the end of their campaign in the primary, or maybe it's for this part of the election, win or lose, I really, really hope they stay committed to politics and the cause. You've got, so much more name recognition, new skill set. Um, we still need you.
Well, the Democrats run again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
You see that until they're finally elected. So I hope they don't give up after one round. We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. So when we come back, I wanted to kind of a little bit of Senate, maybe a little bit of governors, and the silver lining.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550, the best talk in town. I am joined by Sean Burdine. We're just about to jump into what happened nationally. With Senate, still not decided. We've got 3 races kind of outstanding. Probably Georgia's going to a runoff.
It is going.
And what happened with some of the governors? And what is the silver lining? I don't think this was all bad. It just wasn't the wave that so many people wrongly predicted. Like you said early on, this is a culture war.
Absolutely it is. That's why, I think we really do need to almost look at everything at a state-by-state, sometimes even county and candidate level to really sort of get a good grasp of what's happening here. And I really don't think, this was a massive failure like some people's trying to say it is. I think right now it's just really a continuation of this culture war that we find ourselves in. We lost some governors. We lost, a couple seats here and there. But we also picked up a lot. And we're still on track to get the House. The Senate is going to be probably a virtual tie, effectively. I'm not sure who's going to get the nod one way or the other. I think Republicans are on track to have it, but it's not a guarantee. House is pretty likely, and we'll kind of see where things go from there. I don't think that's a totally bad thing like a lot of people are trying to paint it out to be. It's just, I think the expectations were too high going into this.
I think also there was a great underestimation of the role of abortion. I didn't think it was going to be as big. I thought it was going to be the economy, inflation, crime. And when we were looking at exit polling, a lot of the left was totally motivated by that. I don't know why you'd be motivated in a state like California by that, because we're going to take anybody that wants an abortion, we're going to pay for them to get here. Now, I think that's evil, but that's what the people decided.
Well, I think that is an important one to talk about because it is a very contentious issue in our country. Statewide, it looks like Prop 1, which was the abortion measure, has a huge amount of support for it. It looks like that one's going to not only just succeed, but exceed by very large margins. So that tells us a large number of voters definitely support that. We're motivated by that. I think I would concede that I underestimated that one, because I think one of the things that also really is one of the stories here is how important do people find some of these topics and issues? I mean, the economy definitely is usually a driving force, but a lot of the people, some of these culture issues are very, very personal to them. And if they're highly motivated on that, especially some demographics out there that are really being targeted by some of these conversations, they're going to get out there. They're highly motivated voters. Rains, snow, doesn't matter. They're going to be out there.
Right. So there's essentially, we're down to 3 Senate races that matter. It looks like Georgia's going to the runoff, which means nothing will be decided for about 40 days. Is that something like that?
It's going to be at least several weeks.
And then you've got Nevada, which is leaning towards the Democrat. No, excuse me. Nevada's leaning towards the Republican with Laxalt and Cortez Masto. But we'll see. Do you know anything about their election system?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that, going back to our current election style in California, we've kind of been the testing ground for a lot of these sorts of policies, and the policies have been moving east from us. So a lot of these states that were traditionally pretty strongly red have now become effectively purple. And it's not just because of migration from people out of California over, and voting trends like that. But honestly, I really do attribute a lot of it to the election system itself. I just because of all of the information that I've learned over the last several months that really just kind of support that.
So they don't they don't have a count, just like we don't have a count for
It,
similar reasons. Then
any state that is using large vote by mail system, it creates a major bottleneck on the ability to count everything rapidly.
so that same all of those same ideas would apply to the next state I'm going to talk about, which is Arizona, which is
Yep.
Kelly and Masters. Looks like that's probably going to go to the Democrat, but who knows? It's close enough. Who knows?
That one is almost basically a tie right now. I feel like over the last couple days it's kind of been moving closer and closer. We'll see. I think that one is still too close to call on that one. Remaining optimistic, but we'll see.
Well, Arizona is just under 70% are reported, but we don't know exactly because with the vote by mail system,
There's also been a
it's a
lot
big
of
question mark.
Well, there's also been a lot of very strange occurrences happening in Maricopa. I know Maricopa again.
The
Yeah,
Magic County, yeah.
yeah, and that one includes Phoenix, and it's like I think about 60% of the total ballots for the entire state
Yeah.
through that one county.
So what you're saying is the population's large enough there that could shift the rest of the state very easily.
It potentially can, and that's one of the things too. Anytime you start looking at state voting patterns, it's always the major cities that are blue, and the rest of the state tends to be red. So if you have a very disproportionate urban population like that, it can definitely shift it.
I want to go ahead and jump over to governors. The fact that it was even close in New York, the fact that it was within 10 points in New York is huge.
Yeah, New York picked up some Republican seats.
4.
It's no,
and they were in New York City.
Yeah,
they weren't in out because just like California, we have our blue area, and then the vast majority of the state is actually red. Mm-hmm. New York's the same way.
It is.
Outside of New York City, the majority of New York is red. The fact that they picked up 4 seats in Manhattan area in New York City is huge.
I think so too. I think that's actually a pretty telling sign of how people really feel about these policies, the COVID policies, the lockdowns, everything with that. People are tired of all of that stuff. So New York, of all states, really turning that one actually did surprise me too. Mm-hmm. That was bigger than I expected.
Well, think of it as just like California. New York is in a deep liberal hole, and so it takes a while to come out. Yeah. It's going to be incremental steps. Anybody that thinks one magic candidate's going to come in and change everything is wrong.
I think that right there is also another major thing to kind of think about too. I mean, a lot of people tend to think that we had a very big sudden change recently. It's more just we reach that tipping point. People just kind of realize what's been happening. What's really been happening though is many slow moving parts and changes over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. Decades and decades of just changes in policies and cultures and ideas. And so I think we're approaching another tipping point where we start to rethink some of these newer ideas.
Absolutely. But it all starts from local. Though I want to get to my next big point where I'm only to talk about Kristi Noem very briefly.
Okay.
She strongly stood against the COVID lockdowns, never locked down anything, took a bold stand, and was strongly endorsed by her voters.
Right.
Even higher than DeSantis. But that is a more conservative area.
Yeah.
More importantly, we're down to a little over a minute.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis did something amazing.
Yeah, he was the biggest winner that night.
Yep.
Easily. I mean, Florida was deep red, and
mm-hmm. Even the blue parts.
Which I mean, all that can say is that what people living there think, and that's that they really support this man, the things that he's done, and the way he stood against so much of the policies we see of the rest of the country.
Well, he found a way to fight without making it nasty. There's the difference. It's like he's doing what Trump was doing, but he's doing it in a more polished way. It's almost like, yes, Trump stood for bold policies. DeSantis stands for bold policies. But it was a little easier to hear him because the volume was a little lower.
I also blame the media for that. I think the media just absolutely tried to do everything that they possibly could to destroy Trump, especially early on, so that there'd be no single person that felt comfortable supporting him publicly, and then absolutely tried to destroy anybody who did, and so that they tried to turn wearing a MAGA hat into a hate crime.
Yep. Well, they tried to turn anybody that had a different thought into a fascist.
Yep.
Don't forget that, folks.
Nope.
That's how our president, current bumbling Biden, is labeling us. Well, I thank you for joining me today. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Final thoughts for the social media audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm absolutely just, pretty optimistic about everything moving forward. I think what we're seeing is still part of that gradual sort of shift, realignment that's happening in American politics as people are getting increasingly frustrated with policies they don't like. And, I don't think that we should ever really expect a massive shift or change. I think 2016 was a watershed moment in American politics where a lot of working class people finally reached a breaking point where they said, this is too much. The politics of my party and my the companies in our country obviously are selling us out and don't support
Right.
us. We need something massively different, and
We need something populist.
we do. And I think that that's still very much a common trend when you look at the Republican Party these days, and the Democrat Party continues to push further radical ideas. They try to say that the Republican and MAGA and Trump and nationalism and populism is evil and fascist and bad, but it's overwhelmingly supported by people,
Right.
the real people
Of every color.
every background, except for the ultra wealthy liberal elites and the woke weirdos that spend too much time on Twitter and live in major cities.
Yeah, that's fair. So we didn't gain the ground that we could have, but we didn't lose ground. We just took a smaller step forward than we thought we were going to.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, it's going to be. I think people are by and large kind of sick and tired of a lot of the fighting and the hostility. I think there's some people that really enjoy it, but I think the most people, the average people, are just they just want to not care about politics, and they just want to get to their life back to a comfortable spot where they have some confidence, they have some trust that our country's moving in the right direction.
Yes, but for that to happen, they need to get involved. You don't have to go crazy,
Yeah.
but you do need to get involved.
I fully agree. I fully agree, and I think that there's one thing that also holds true is that the center holds, and so we might have these points where things go a little bit too far one way or the other, but eventually the center kind of bounces back. The center might shift a bit over time,
Right.
but the center holds.
Well, folks, I thank you for spending this time with me. Sean, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for
I
having
think
me.
that is a wrap.